afternoon. I'm Jim Mantooth.
Good afternoon, did you?
I'm glad to be here to be the spokesperson for my family. Up here with me is my sister Joellen.
Good to be here.
Joellen Howard. And this is my wife Robbie. We have some other Mantooths here. Doug back there and his son Garrett. And of course Pat over here, you all know her. Mike's wife, and Mike, I forgot him. And we have Emily Howard and John Howard.
John's
And
my
Carol,
husband.
and Carol, Jack's daughter, Doug's sister.
Meaner sister.
Meaner sister, okay. Well,
Don't say that, Doug.
She's pretty good on the back.
our family all attended Lindsay schools, and we feel like we got a good education there and a lot of personal attention. And
Mine on
Guy Robertson was a big help to me, and I appreciate him. He gave me a lot of special attention and made a difference in my life. We had a minister, Glenwood Busby, at the Baptist Church, and he also made a difference in my life. Our family started off living closer to Maysville, and he was a pastor there at the Baptist Church, and he moved to Lindsay about the same time we did in 1947. And he introduced me to a lot of things, reading and National Geographic, and I really appreciate the interest that he showed in me. During the pandemic, I wrote our family history, a book that you can see over here, and I did a lot of research on that, mostly using Ancestry.com and also some other online sources, and most of the things in here happened before my time, so I didn't know those people, but I have been around a long time now too, and so I know some things that are historical now. No doubt there are some mistakes in my family history because I keep coming up with new information, and the information that's available doesn't always agree, one source with another. And if you go back, people didn't write things down back then. And so you have to know what was going on at the time and what they did. And from that, maybe you can discover a logical motive for their moves here and there. The first Mantooth to come to this country was a Scotsman, and he called himself John Thomas Mantooth, and he said that he was the merchant of Glasgow. He came here in 1720, so it was pre-revolutionary times. And it was he came to Richmond, Virginia, right on the coast, and he was a person tied to the crown in England, Scotland at that time, and there was a rebellion going on where someone else was trying to depose the king, and that was in Scotland. And it was called the Jacobite Rebellion, and he was heavily involved in that. But he was representing the crown, and I think that he ended up with a lot of property around Mount Vernon and on down the coast. His business was establishing tobacco plantations. He had, and I think he was being granted land by the English crown. He ended up with several large properties there. He married a woman who was half English and half indigenous. It was a tribe in Virginia along the Potomac River, and you probably have heard of Pocahontas. Well, Pocahontas was in this same tribe, and I don't think you know any of the others, but so he married this woman who was half English and half Indian, and they had 4 children, 2 daughters first, and then 2 sons. Our ancestor was the younger son. So he and his wife died early when the kids were still at home. He had, I've read, 90 black slaves, including household slaves, that raised the children. And of course the mother was indigenous also. And I think they grew up knowing the system of slavery, and they grew up knowing that the colonizers were taking the land away from the natives. There was a big fight going on. So the first ancestor left a will stating that whenever they came of age, the 2 daughters were supposed to get separate plantations, and he named which ones they were. And then the other leftover plantations were to be split between the 2 sons. So our ancestor, when that time came, I think he was about 17 or 18 years old, he said, "I'm out of here." And I think he did not like slavery, and he did not like colonization, because he left there before the Revolutionary War, and he went to Shenandoah, Virginia, which was on the edge of the Smoky Mountains. And that's where he and his wife got married, where they raised their kids. And and he changed his name from Mantooth to Mantooth. The clan in Scotland goes by several different names. There is Minteth, Mantooth, Monteth, maybe some more too. It's an old Highland Scots clan. So the remaining kids, the son became part of the American Revolution, and they fought for the South in the Civil War. One time I went to a cemetery in Vicksburg, Mississippi, where there was a big Civil War battle, and there was a Monteth there. And I know that Harry Truman's family is descended from the daughters. It's not a very numerous family, but that's what happened. Okay, so these 2 people, the younger son, who was our ancestor, John Thomas Mantooth, he and his wife had some children, and I think 4, and our ancestor was called Cherokee Tom Mantooth. And he had lots of kids, about 10 kids, and he lived in that same area. It became Eastern Tennessee. They moved a little bit farther to the west, and they strictly stayed out of the Cherokee tribe. All the civilized tribes, including the Cherokees, had black slaves, and I think he did not like that. The family stayed successive generations, about 3 more generations stayed in the same area. All of the marriages were to what appear to have been European immigrants. I think, as far as I could tell, we do not have any other Native Americans, and I think in our family, and that would make us quite a bit less than 1% Native Americans.
You got about as much as Elizabeth.
Huh?
Elizabeth Warren.
Yeah, like Elizabeth Warren. That's a good one, John. So they stayed in Eastern Tennessee for about 3 generations, and then there was a Mantooth who was a blacksmith, and he traveled from Eastern Tennessee across Tennessee into Arkansas, and they settled in northwestern Arkansas on the Arkansas River near what is now Paris, Arkansas, not too far from Fort Smith. The Cherokee tribe had previously been forcibly moved out of the Smoky Mountains and moved to Indian Territory. And our ancestors were not part of that because they were not part of the Cherokee tribe, never wanted to or never did join. In this area of northwestern Arkansas, there were southern sympathizers, northern sympathizers, and as the Civil War came along, our ancestor joined the Union Army as a farrier. I think he was involved with blacksmithing, shoeing horses, and his son, who would have been our great grandfather, had an interesting life. He was 17 years old when the Civil War broke out, and he was a horse trader. His father was off in the army, but this son rode out with some other people to the west into Indian Territory, and I think in western Oklahoma there are lots of horses. The Comanches had horses out there. And so I know that they obtained these horses, but I don't know exactly how they obtained them. Maybe they stole them, maybe they traded guns, or I don't know. But they sold the horses to both the Southern and Union Army. But I think his sentiments would have been with the Union Army, but the country he was traveling through with the Native Americans, they had slaves, and they were sympathizing with the South. Well, Civil War was over, and he went back, the son, who was our great-grandfather, went back to this place in northwestern Arkansas, and he married a woman who was very important in our family. Her name was Pendergrass, Lindsay Pendergrass. And I've heard my dad talk of the Pendergrass connection in our family. Well, he waited until his father died, and he had, I think, 3 children by that time, including our the person I'm supposed to talk about today, John Columbus Mantooth. And he was around here, but they had an interesting life. They after his father died, the blacksmith, he took all the wagons and the horses, and he moved to a new town northeast of Dallas. It's called Leonard, Texas. Well, he was there for 7 years, built the first hotel. He must have had some money, all the wagons and horses and stuff that he had, and he was developing this town. And he had 3 more children while he was there in the 7 years. He also built clinic buildings where his wife's brothers, Pendergrass, came and practiced medicine. After just 7 years being there, he got some kind of a bad diagnosis that he was about to die. And so he took his family and was going back to northwest Arkansas, where he was from, and he took along with him a man called H.G. Smith. He was kind of a no one ever said who he was. There was a family that we knew he was from, a farm family, but he was a mystery because I was able to read some prison records in Texas. This place where they were from, Leonard, was close to a Texas prison, and there was an escaped horse thief from by the same name exactly, and would have been the right age. And so I think that was the same man. Well, they went back to northwest Arkansas, taking H.G. Smith with them. And when they got there, the oldest child in that family, a daughter, Aunt Mandy, we call her, she married H.G. Smith. And the father, who had the bad diagnosis, died just a few months after that. And so I think that my great-grandfather in his horse trading days went through an area called, well, it's south of Norman, on the south banks of the South Canadian River. There's a place called Rosedale over there. It was called Okra at that time. And that turns out to be where my grandfather and grandmother got married.
What?
And so after my great-grandfather died, his wife, Lindsay Pendergrass, went with all the children except for Aunt Mandy, who had already gone to Okra. And she went in wagons with them, and she was trying to establish membership in the Choctaw tribe. it was based on something that her husband had told her, but it was not accepted. I think it wasn't true, because I couldn't find any record that there was any Choctaw connection. But she went to Marietta, Oklahoma with all these wagons, and all of the kids except for Aunt Mandy, who had already gone on. She circled around for a few years, getting back up to this same area, Okra, on the South Canadian River. Well, that was a tough life. The kids weren't getting any schooling, and that they were living in covered wagons. Now that's going to be a dog's life. So they finally got back to where they were headed, Okra, and Aunt Mandy had married someone, and eventually she married two people as her husbands died, who were land traders. And I think that she was instrumental in helping her family, which I think is what she was setting off to do in the first place. So she helped, I think, my grandfather, Lum and Lula, get their first place on Criner Creek. I think I've got pictures of Aunt Mandy standing out in front of that house. There's a picture over there that I painted of the house. It's an old Victorian house. I won't back up just a little bit. When my grandfather and his brother, Barry Mantooth, who lived in Purcell, they went in covered wagons and in 1913 to Arizona, a place called Bowie, Arizona. Now we have had an opportunity to get to know Bowie, Arizona, and there's nothing there. My wife got stopped for speeding there. They had a speed trap in that place. So I think that my grandfather and his brother went there to try to get some money back from H.G. Wells, the escape.
H.G. Smith.
H.G. Smith, thanks. And that nothing happened. They loaded their wagons on flat cars and brought them back to Oklahoma. And that was the end of that. So they got married and established homes in Oklahoma. Uncle Barry ended up in Purcell, and my granddad was in Okra, which became Rosedale. His Aunt Mandy, his sister, I think helped him get this farm, the one that's pictured over there, our Criner Creek farm. And my grandfather cleared the land, straightened the creek, put levees on it, and there were 6 sons there, and I think they were all helping. Only the oldest son ever got to go to college. That was Uncle Alvin. But when the Depression came, it was hard. They were raising cotton, and cotton was such a low price that he didn't have enough money to hang on to his farm. Well, during this time, my dad just finished the 8th grade at the Payne School, and he did not go to school anymore after that. He tried boarding school in Lindsay, but he thought it was costing too much money for his parents to afford, so he went back home, and he stayed there for a few years until he met my mother, who was an Alexander from Maysville. It it was a good deal for both of them. My mother had finished Maysville High School, where she was the valedictorian, in 1932. Well, they got married in 1934, and she was living with her parents, and it was they were just about destitute, and and her family was very protective of them. That family was a strict Baptist. Her father was a member of the Primitive Baptist Church, and also known as the Foot Washing Baptist. Well, he was protecting this child, his youngest daughter. My mother was the youngest one in that family. Well, they got married, and they lived out at Criner Creek in that house for a few days. And I think my Aunt Mandy, what by then was married to her second husband, who was named Jim Tuggle. And they ended up going to a place about 7 miles east of Lindsay on the Washita River, South Bank. Is a beautiful area, a nice farm, and that's where they lived starting in 1934. My sister Betty was born there a year later, and I came along 3 years after Betty, and that's the sin of our family all those years. It wasn't until after World War II, in 1947, that my father bought a place on the northeast edge of Lindsay. I think it was about 200 acres at that time. And that's where we grew up. There had been a problem with that area, and I think it's the reason my father could afford the land. It flooded all the time. There had been something called the Bear Highbarger project to divert the water from Bear Creek to the east so that Lindsay wouldn't flood. When the railroad and the Highway 19 were built into Lindsay, they raised the grade, and so the water that had been going south to the river was blocked, and it had to go somewhere. They eventually built ways to send it to the east. Carl, now this is something that's important to you.
Yeah.
And so the water drainage was a problem, and my dad devoted a lot of his life in trying to correct that drainage, and he was partially successful, but not completely. So he ended up having more kids. First disaster to come along was Mike over there. And,
Thank you, bro.
and there were 3 more girls after that.
Yeah.
This is one of them right here. Joella.
Number 5.
Yeah. So my dad did some trading with his father, and he told me, don't ever trade with your relatives. They'll cheat you every time. And he told me another thing. His father was a trader, and he would buy one farm and buy another farm and keep moving. During the war, he moved to raise wheat in New Mexico. Before that, he had a farm just north of Wynnewood. But my dad said he didn't care where I went, but he said, go somewhere and stay there. Don't be moving around all the time. That was one of the best bits of advice I ever got from him. You know of my family that's here, and there are lots of pictures up here. And my Lum and Lula were nice people to us, but we didn't see them very much. He had almost no schooling because of being on this odyssey from Northwest Arkansas in a covered wagon, going all through Oklahoma, trying to find a place to stay. And he chewed tobacco. He'd spit out the window of his car, and it was just covered with tobacco juice all the way back from the driver's side. Did you ever see that, Doug? No.
I did.
Oh, yeah, Mike did. Okay. And my dad's was a little more civilized than that. He didn't drink, he didn't chew, he didn't smoke. He told me one time, he didn't care how old I was. If he ever saw me smoking a cigarette, he would kick me right off the ground. And my mother was pretty strict too.
No.
Yeah. Well, we had a good life growing up here, and our families were solid. We got a lot of help from this community, and we appreciate the help that we got. Now, Carl Dutton back here has purchased one of our farms, and we have great hopes.
And his wife Kathy.
And his wife Kathy. And you had something to do with it? Okay. And we have made, Mike and his wife are going to keep what we call a home place. And another farmer is going to buy Kreiner Creek. Joellen and her husband are keeping our Hilltop Ranch.
Didn't you have one sister that married a Garrett?
Yeah, Betty.
Yes, Betty.
And she just died about 2 months ago. That's one of the reasons they're all here.
He died 3 or 4 years ago, didn't
No, he died, about 3 or 4 years ago.
he? And she just died last year.
Yes, right.
Don't forget Marilyn's.
That's correct.
That's
They
right.
were
Don't
missionaries
forget about
for
Marilyn's vine. That you haven't mentioned Marilyn's vine.
Oh, Maryland is buying 80 acres of mostly pasture land on our Kreiner Creek place, too.
That's
Maryland
her
is the
youngest sister.
younger sister. And does anybody have any questions?
Jim, who wound up with the Dobbins place?
We sold that to Kelly Donham. That was our first move.
Is that right?
Yeah, we did.
I'll spend a couple hours on that farm and
Yeah, I know you have.
several others.
I know you have.
I think Lindsay is a wonderful place to have grown up. And I'm pleased that my mother was from Maysville. She was born in 1912. Dad was born in 1912, and Mama was 1914. They were very, very proud to be farmers.
From Fort Worth.
Dad liked to fly an airplane, and of course Wiley Post was from Maysville area, and there were many other farmers in the area that liked to fly, and Dad had a group called the Flying Farmers, and one of his workshops was actually an airplane hangar.
At that time, we lived on the Tuggle farm to the east toward Maysville, and my dad said that he needed that plane so that he could fly back and forth from that place to Lindsay. And my mother put up with it for several years. He built that airplane hangar out where we live now before he built the house. But my dad had a lot to do with building the house out there. There had been an old house there, and he tore it down, used some of the lumber from it, and got more lumber, and built a house in 1947. And that's where Mike is going to live now with Pat.
You tell them that about your grandfather in the Payne Baptist Church. So you grew
Oh,
up building.
Grandfather Mantooth Lum hauled the lumber from Lindsay to build the Payne Baptist Church.
You know, we just celebrated the 100-year anniversary out there.
Is that right?
Yeah, 100 years back in March, yeah.
Do you go to church
that's where
there?
we attend.
Yeah, I have been to church there with your family.
Yeah.
When I would go out and stay with Uncle Jack
And Aunt Mary.
and Aunt Mary.
Yeah, they stayed in Mom and Dad lived in the old Mantooth place there for several years, didn't they?
Yes, they did. And I would go out and stay with them.
Stay with them.
And Uncle Jack would teach me how to hunt coons. I think I never saw one.
Sure it wasn't snipe?
Yeah, like a snipe. Now Mike's had some chances to hunt snipe. I helped him out with that.
I suckered for it. Granddad had an old mule, stayed out in the barn that's not pictured there, but it wasn't far from that house. It, of course, was a wooden barn. Had little tiny windows down the sides where the mules could stick their heads out. And this old mule's name was Lightning. Granddad was having trouble with it. Lightning would walk in another mule's stall where that mule was eating and bite him up between the shoulders and make him back out of there. And then he'd run in there and eat his feed and then go back and eat his own. So Daddy took him out to the field to pull a plow, or Granddad rather. My dad's told me about it because he was standing around as a young kid seeing this. And that mule was full of old oats and whatever, you know. He was puffed up. And he got something that my granddad called the thumps, which was, I imagine, bloat of some kind. And that darn mule laid down sideways on a new plow and broke the single tree out of it. And it made my granddad mad. And he took that busted single tree off and hit that mule upside the head, and it darn near killed him. Right there.
Well, Mike knows more about that than I do.
Was
Yeah.
We had,
Jack and Wes brothers, is that?
yes,
how
they
it
were,
was? Okay.
yeah. A family of 6 boys.
Well,
My grandmother learned how to make a big batch of biscuits to feed them. Yes. So I feel very fortunate to be one of 6 children. I'm number 5 out of the group. Mom and Dad had kids in school at Lindsay continuously for 30 years. They were recognized when my younger sister Marilyn graduated. Lindsay was good to us. The school system was good. And I think Dad and Mom gave back to the community. They loved being part of the church. Dad was in Rotary Club. And he liked to go to the ranch house every morning. He said that's where he would do his business. Well, I guess he would, you know.
He did.
Later on, it became the gas and go where he'd go.
That's right. But we kids all played in the marching band, and our parents were band supporters. Mike was in a little jazz band, the Noise Boys.
And I created that thing.
It was good. And,
Yeah, they went around with that thing, played everywhere. Charlie Haley took us to the basketball games and we played there. Me, Ernie Woodruff, David Edwards, Dave and Dan Fox, and Randy Phillips, and Joe Grady Jackson. All played in that thing, and it was a blast. I had a great time with it. I loved every minute of it, and I didn't do any more playing until I got to OSU, and I joined Alexander's Ragtime Band. It's Ashley Alexander, and then he discovered that I could sing.
and Mike's been singing ever since.
Hey Doug, is there any memory that you want to share of your grandparents? And
Well, you know, I was caught the very, very tail end of the broomcorn era, which, you know, back, 60 years, 70 years ago, broomcorn was, we were at one time the broomcorn capital of the world, or was what we was quoted as, and I can remember just being in the very edge of that, and I can remember we'd always harvest the broomcorn, and we'd use the field thrashers of Wes's, and we'd thrash it out in the field, and we'd go out and gather up the bundles in the wagons, and then we'd take them to the broomcorn sheds and shelve the broomcorn out so that it would dry.
I ran somebody's hat through one of those. Thrashed it right out.
And it was, you talk about broomcorn now, and I was telling Mike, we was with Garrett, my son. We was with him and his a little girl that was with him last week, and we were telling her about the broomcorn era, and she was like, broomcorn?
Allison was her name.
No, Maria.
Oh, Maria.
Maria.
Yeah, that's right. You're right.
So anyways, she was just amazed by the broomcorn era and, what all took place during that. And we explained to her how it was made and everything. And it's just,
Carl has a museum here in town, right?
yeah.
Carl and Kathy.
Takes care of it though.
Yep, yes, Kathy, yes. And
The Ballard
We're
family
going to-
here in Lindsay were lots contributed lots to the broomcorn. Johnny Ballard, Hazel Ballard, had some interesting kids. Roland Ballard was one of them. I ain't gonna say any more about him. But he was interesting too.
well, that
in
was
his
the
own
best
way.
cash crop we ever had, was
Yeah.
broomcorn. And do y'all remember the broomcorn factory here? And the marvelous products that they made.
Yeah, I'm the one talking about. Yeah.
So,
You have your own broomcorn crop for what?
that's right. My first car that I ever owned myself was paid for by broomcorn. Dad had given me a crop on what's now Carl's land. At that time, it was 40 acres, and there was a fine crop of broomcorn there. But that's what I used to pay for my first car. And
What I remember
was ever
about that
grateful.
broomcorn crop is that I was out there, we were dating, and so Wes put me to working in the broomcorn. And I'd left from doing that already. I had worked all my life in broomcorn. Anyway, I went out there and did it. And we had to do the hauling, which is picking up the broomcorn, obviously. And they put Joellen on the tractor with us. I'll be darned. She spent the whole time griping about the fumes. We were having to stack the stuff on the wagon. And she didn't trade off. Everybody, you trade off, you know, you ride one wagon full and then you trade driver. She just drove.
Smart. Smart girl. That was the litmus test that my father gave to see whether
that
he
was
was
the test
suitable.
for me.
The first episode of Women's Lib.
You know, if I'm ever really just tired or something, or when I've been, had my hip broke, you just get so tired, you know, and you can't explain it to somebody. And I always say, did you ever work broom corn? You put in 10 hours, you work for 10 hours. And driving home, oh my man, you're just too tired to talk.
Well,
But they'll say,
you,
what? You know, they don't even know what I'm talking
you get up at daybreak and start breaking the fields down, and then you'd cut, and then you'd have to go out in the afternoon and thresh it.
Yeah.
And that threshing was just a wonderful job.
No, it was not, it was hell.
And I still remember the only way you could get that fuzz off of you had to take a cold bath. It had to be ice cold or you couldn't do it.
Well, I remember, when we lived on the Tuggle place, the workers would, after working in Broomcorn, would all jump in the Washita River.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It
that's
was right
what
there.
gets the fuzz off, is no dirty pond. And you bathed and you thought you was clean.
Well, and then the Washita River is cleaner than it is now.
Yeah.
So, another funny thing that probably Garrett over here would identify with is when I was in high school, I was undecided whether I wanted to be an engineer or I wanted to go to medical school and be a doctor. So I started off in engineering, and after 4 years, I actually worked a summer as an engineer, and I talked to one of the workers there where I was working at Fluor Engineering Construction Company in Los Angeles, and I asked him, well, if you had a choice between being an engineer or being a doctor, which would you choose? He said, go to medical school. And so I went home. Well, I'd already talked to my wife-to-be then, and went home and I told my parents, and my dad said if he had it to do over again, he would be a doctor. And my mother then said, if she had it to do over again, she would marry a doctor. Is that of any help to you, Garrett?
See, I figured out
Yeah.
after a couple math classes, I realized I don't like this. And I switched from there.
Yeah, he started out in aerospace engineering,
Uh-huh.
and I think calculus 2 was maybe the one that was like the.
Oh, you're funny. I didn't even get that far. I know Cal's one, and I realized no, this ain't gonna work.
But I'm sure Hank's father was an inspiration. He was out at the Mantooth house a lot, helping
Yeah.
Dr. Ryan.
Y'all remember Dr. Ryan
Uh-huh.
and the days of house call? Yes.
Hank, this is Hank Ryan, Dr. Ryan's son.
Oh, is that right?
Yes.
No. I remember him.
Hank and my sister Linda were a couple through high school, and they both attended OU. And anyway, you remember Hank's sister Maggie and older brother Roger. Yeah. Hank was right in the middle.
Yeah, Roger died in 2016. He was an engineer and was involved in several petroleum-related engineering things. And Maggie has recently retired. She's been living in Perryton, Texas for over 40 years. back when she was still teaching, she taught junior high English, and when someone had asked me about Maggie, I was able to say, well, she's in Perryton, Texas, doing the best imitation of Dorothy Kaysen you've ever seen.
Our school teachers were exceptional here. And so was the Rotary Club. I got the opportunity to live in Sweden a year as a Rotary exchange student after graduating. And we had foreign exchange students that would come and to stay several months at our home and learn about Oklahoma as well. A young lady from Australia was here, and then a young man from Brazil came. So we were very proud of this community, and I feel like we were trained to, number one, to be the best we could be, to work hard.
I was going to tell him a story about my dad and Guy Robertson. So I'm from Shawnee, Oklahoma, and so when Jim and I were pretty serious, or maybe we were even engaged, my father said that he had checked out Jim Mantooth because he and Guy Robertson, who was in the superintendent of schools, were both active Methodist laymen. And so he said, and Guy Robertson said, Jim Mantooth is okay. So it wasn't until a lot later that Jim told me that Guy Robertson even drove him to classes at OU because they did not offer that class at Lindsay. And you know, how many superintendents of school would do that? And so, I mean, my dad said, well, do you know Jim Mantooth? Well, did he ever? Anyway, I thought that was real dedication.
It really was.
Lawton Carey helped me out on a couple of occasions.
Give you a whooping?
Was a flat part of a board, yeah. Yes.
One summer, your dad bought a bale hauler that was a flat bed, and it would lift up and, somehow put the bales in the barn.
Yeah.
And he asked my husband if he would run it one summer. I don't think he lasted the summer, but he did go out and help me a lot of nights. So it was the state of the art.
Yeah,
They'd
it
never
was.
heard of a machine that could do what you usually had to do to stack.
That was called a New Holland
Yeah, it wasn't
stack cruiser. And you could set it up on a flat cement floor, and it would stack up little square bales. But I'm telling you, honey, if you didn't watch it, when you pulled out under it, they'd tumble over. And that wasn't but one way to get them back up, because that's the old fashioned.
Well, I don't think he ever did that, so I think I would have heard about it if he had done it.
Do you remember when the big bales first came into fashion? You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember Dad and Wes went to Heston, Kansas to a school there. And Wes had already had, I know of one of them, Wes had already had one for a year or so, and Dad had worked on it and used it for over a year. And him and Wes went to Heston, Kansas, and went through the school. And Dad made the remark, he said, I think I know just about as much about these as they do, really. Because he'd already worked on them for, a full year. So.
Well, Dad liked equipment, and certainly one of his best friends was Houston Standridge.
Mm-hmm.
And then when prices would get a little high there, he'd go shop in different places and buy used tractors. But when Dad finally retired, he had a lot of equipment.
Everything everybody bought two of. Not everybody did buy two of them.
Yeah.
How many front ends for 4020s do you buy?
I don't know.
When we sold his tractors, we sold 15 tractors.
Yeah,
And
You bought two of them.
Some of them ran.
I saved one back that I wanted to use around the farm to do small jobs. And I picked the sorriest tractor. I just had nothing but trouble with it. Finally got rid of it. And I bought what I thought was a very nice Kubota with an air-conditioned cab on it, big tractor. And then Mike came on the scene, and before I knew what had happened, he had sold that tractor and bought John Deere stuff, and then he's addicted to John Deere.
Well, your dad
They're
and
good tractors.
Harry
Yeah, they are.
Moore and Bill Williams and Houston
Yeah.
went to Mexico City one
I
time.
know about that.
Wouldn't you like to have been a little mouse there?
Yeah, I would.
Tell them about the tornado.
Oh, I know about that.
Another story about my dad was he built a cabin down on Lake Texoma, and I think Bill Williams was in on it too. And they built a boathouse, and one time they were in this early cabin before they built the bigger one, and Daddy said it sounded like a freight train was coming, and he looked out and there was a tornado headed straight for them, and they ran out and they were hanging in a bar ditch on the trees. Daddy said that the gravel was embedded in his scalp from that. It rolled his pickup down the hill, ruined the pickup, and it went straight from this cabin to the boathouse, and it sank the boathouse. But he built it back and built a new cabin. Bill Williams was part of that. It was a make-do cabin made out of old army barracks. But they finally, Daddy wanted to sell it because he said that all he ever got to do is work down there because the lawn needed to be mowed or one thing and another every time.
I honeymooned in that cabin.
Did you?
That exact tree. I saw that tree that Bill Williams, he had a chokehold on it. And Daddy, in that tornado you was talking about, and Daddy had his arm stuck through Bill's overall gallus. Ain't no flapping like that.
We took Joe and her sister Linda down there, and maybe you too, Mike, but
Yeah, Mike went.
because Jim and I had a lot of fun going to the cabin when he was in medical school. You know, we didn't have any money, and so we could, if we had enough gas to get there,
Who did
we could have a
back
good
then?
time. And so I came up with this decorating scheme to make it really nice. I made cornices to put up, and we were going to paint it all white. I think it was gray, you know, which was not very pretty. And we told Joe and Linda and I guess Mike that we had a secondhand old sailboat that we owned part interest in with another couple, and that they could go out on the sailboat, but not until they did their work. And they did it. We had a good time.
It was fun. Yeah, John proposed to me on the porch of that
You don't
cabin.
say.
Yes. I was lucky. It was near the OU biological station. And one summer I was their secretary and lived at the cabin. And
Well, that worked out fine.
it was good memories. Yeah, we liked to go there. That was about as far away as we would go for vacation. Dad always said that every time he left the farm, a cow would die, you know? So, or something would happen, a storm would hit.
Yep,
But he was very happy to be a farmer rancher,
yeah.
and we were happy to be his offspring.
Well, Joe, you
Yeah.
really know the history of working in the hospital, so you got a lot of opportunities to
Well,
get
my first
experience.
job, my
And
first
then-
job was right here at Burford Manor when I was a teenager. Martha Burford and I began, maybe we were 15 years old or so in the summer. I believe Martha became a lab technician. And I became a registered nurse and then later on a nurse practitioner. But my first love was taking care of our wonderful people there at Burford Manor. And I'd find all types of history. A lot of people would tell me about growing up.
Oh,
Yeah, and I was lucky to go to Seattle, Washington, where Jim was doing his residency there and was a candy striper in one of the hospitals in Seattle.
You probably did, I was gonna say, you probably didn't get paid, but did you get to eat some of the ice cream that you dipped up for people?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Absolutely.
Was it
So,
just 2 boys? It the family, 2 boys and 4 girls.
Yeah, we're here,
Yes.
right?
uh-huh,
The 2
Yeah.
boys are still running. We've lost two of the sisters
Yeah.
so far.
Betty just recently.
Yeah,
yes, uh-huh. We
but
have,
we're all still a tight family, close to each other.
My husband's first job was working for Wes, Mark Holden,
Oh, I know,
Okay.
I remember Mark.
yes.
and he had a lot of, still has a lot of admiration for Wes and his values. And I remember when I first met him was in '76, and he had such pretty blonde hair. And he said that was from, riding in the outside tractor, there was no cover, but he loved that. He said he wished he could have been a farmer when he grew up, but there wasn't enough money in it. And I know that Wes was good to Mark's family with Alvin and his problems, but he was a good influence. And they lived out there for a long time in one of his houses.
That makes me think about how, Jim's dad rarely left home, but he did come up to visit us one time and he went to Rotary, because that's kind of the thing they did, And so they found out that his classification, everybody had a classification, was broomcorn farmer. And they said, we'd like you to talk about that, what that is. And so, anyway, he went up and he told all these stories, but he never did tell them what a broomcorn farmer was. He loved to talk. He was kind of quiet in some ways, but you gave him an audience, and he told him about how he'd been to a doctor in Port Angeles, one of Jim's friends, and he said it was the first time he never got charged. And his knee was all worn off like an old hen's tooth.
That's right. He quoted this, and I'm sure that this doctor didn't tell him that, but that's what he said.
Anyway, so lots of funny stories that we treasure. Yeah, and whether
My
they're true or
dad
not.
worked in the shop on an old anvil, which I could barely move. It was 200 pounds. He had a hammer he hit on that, had a forge right by it. And he wasn't extremely tall, but he was built like a fire plug. And my dad could take your hand and just darn near break it. His hands were so strong. And I said to myself, all right, I'm gonna be able to do that one day. And my arms were long and I couldn't do nothing except just what I could do at home. So I just started doing push-ups. And I did them 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 and I did them. And I finally got drafted. Of course, you know what the Army had you do? Push-ups. I do more than anybody in our company. It was easy. They gave me an old M14 with a bayonet out on the end of it. We never had a bayonet fight. And my first 2 initials are MD for Michael David. But I took that M14 with that bayonet on it, and I whooped everybody in our company. And they renamed me Mad Dog. I've still got pictures of that.
Doug, is there anything you want to say?
Just just glad to be here and glad to hear some of the stories. You know, I kind of caught the tail end of it. I was talking to my son, and I was the youngest of our generation.
Mhm.
And then I said, and I told him, I said, and you're the youngest of the next generation, I believe. I don't believe there's a younger one than he is in the following generation. And he made the remark, he said, well, I was telling him what generation that was, and I said, well, that'd be the generation of David Mantooth, Lum,
Yep.
Wildcat Curley.
Wildcat, yeah.
And so, that's, we're kind of the youngest of the youngest here, so we're the babies of the babies.
Well, my dad got to be very forgetful, and that was toward the end. And one time I was home visiting, and early in the morning I went out to jog on some oil field roads around our house where there were cattle, and one of the people working on the oil well out there said, hey, did you know that your bull is queer? And I went back and told Daddy, and he said, well, sure enough, we haven't had any calves in a long time. So I ended up with a job of going to buy some new bulls at let's see, it's by Chickasha, whatever the sale barn is over there. I literally did not know what I was doing. But there was one of my relatives there who helped me out, and we ended up buying 3 Angus bulls to replace the ones that we had.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, but there's lots of memories about growing up, and I got pulled into the building of barns and things like that. I don't know how many trusses Dad and I built out there in the shop.
No telling.
Those 54-foot trusses, we built them on those cotton wagons, and we flip them over and then weld up the other side. And once we got done with them, we take them out and get out the pipe and build another one. And we did that one whole winter. So that was how I was able to go see this one right over here. that was my spending money.
Well, we appreciate people coming, and hope you enjoyed our stories, and know that we love the people in Lindsay. We feel like we got a good start here, and we're thankful. Yes, Mike.
One last thing I want to tell everybody today.
What?
Pax Domini. Sit, see him, pray. Vobiscum. The peace of God is always with you.
Well, thank you, Mike. We appreciate it.
Every time we
And we have a lot of pictures up here that you might enjoy seeing, old ones.
You're so lucky to have Thelma Love organizing this, and Carl Dutton and Kathy with their Broomcorn Museum. I think it's a wonderful thing. I've been writing my own memoirs, and one every winter. We're too busy gardening in the summer, but I'm on 7 anyway. I'm having my last and 65th high school reunion Saturday, and I brought copies of my story of growing up in Shawnee, and they're going to put them in their museum and in the Oklahoma City, the Oklahoma Historical Museum. And it's just, it takes exceptional people to make things like this happen, like you all, and I just really appreciate what you're doing.
Did you just run around with Mike Spradlin?
Oh, yes, he's coming this week to spend a day with him.
Oh, really?
He lives in Tulsa.
What did he end up doing?
He was a dentist.
I'm Kent Moore.
Oh, I was going to hope to see you. We're,
Here I am.
there you are. Do you still live out northwest of Lindsay?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I'm trying to think of, there's Mike and Bobby Tench and I can't think of all the people right around you and the rest of them right around you.
Well, Mike was an engineer first and then decided to go to dental
I
school.
remember that. I remember you
Wonderful
graduated
person.
as an engineer, went a couple of years, went back to med school.
Yeah.
Damn,
Dennis.
he was like school.
I'm glad you identified yourself. I didn't know who you were.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a younger generation that my kids knew called Lum, and was he Jack's boy, Lum Mantooth. He was named after, I guess, his grandfather.
Well, I think Lum was a nickname.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think.
That's David.
Yeah, that's David.
David,
David
Yeah.
Columbus.
do you know what year he might have graduated?
David graduated in probably 85. He's at 86, 85 or 86?
Yeah, 86.
86.
David came up with Dorothy and Jody to visit us, and the older boys were off doing something else. And we were going down a trail, and it was kind of slick, and he had no hiking boots. He had his cowboy boots, of course. And Dorothy kept saying, "Slow down, David." She always insisted on calling him David, not Lum, like Jody would. Well, he wouldn't slow down, and he ran and got ahead of us. And so when we caught up with him, he was hanging on the edge of a bridge. He was really essentially a log that he was hanging on for dear life, and his cowboy boots had dropped off, and fortunately they didn't go down the stream. Anyway, it was quite a memorable.
Kent, your father and my father were good friends in farming at the same time.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
right down the crowd.
Get another one.
That's true.
Houston
Just get whatever
Sanders and
sizes you
them,
want.
Bill Williams,